Welcome to Snippets of Wisdom with your host, Mike Carell and Dr. Michael J. Murphy. Snippets of Wisdom is the boomer's gift to the next generation and to the world at large. Dr. Michael J. Murphy and Coach Mike Carell are experienced psychotherapists, writers, and healers who find the greatest satisfaction in sharing the benefits of a lifetime of struggle and learning. Coach Mike has spent decades spreading deep wisdom and supporting youth through the juvenile justice system. Dr. Michael has directed mental health services at many correctional centers and testified in countless trials as an expert in sex-related issues and mental illness. And he was one of the 500,000 humans at Woodstock. So now, please welcome the hosts of Snippets of Wisdom.
And welcome to Snippets of Wisdom. My name is Mike Carell. I'm a life coach, hypnotherapist, and my co-host here is Dr. Michael Murphy, forensic psychologist, more than 40 years, dealing with the population of people who've been affected by the criminal element and incarceration and institutional life. Today's topic is the third part of a series regarding sex and touch. And the last part of this has to do with gender identification versus sexual orientation. Now, it's important to note that there is a difference, and although a lot of people don't make a distinction between gender identity and sexual orientation, and there are quite a number of differences and distinctions that need to be recognized. Dr. Michael Murphy is an expert in understanding the effects of either misidentifying or making attributions that are incorrect that could have a sociological impact, could have a personal impact on people's psyche. And I just want to introduce you to Dr. Michael Murphy to talk a little bit about that. Dr. Murphy.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention Coach Mike Carell is somebody who has spent decades working as a probation officer in the legal system, really familiar with, the way that the legal system works and people move through it. Similarly, myself, I have worked for decades overseeing mental health services in jails and prisons throughout the United States and really interviewing many, 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 many thousands of people within the correctional environment over the course of decades of time. And you can well imagine that we have, somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 million people locked up in the United States at any given time. So hundreds of thousands are moving in and out over the course of time. More than 95% of them are males. So obviously they're adult males. So it's a very significant percentage of our population who are affected by this whole environment. And one of the things that we get to see, both Mike Carell, Coach Mike, and myself, are the sexual identity of these individuals. So one of the things that we get to see, there's maybe sometimes between 15 and 30% of the people who are passing through the legal system who are either accused of or serving time for a sexually related offense. So this is a very large number and a very large subpopulation within the correctional environment. So we find that we really end up talking with people very frequently about their sexually related issues. And that's something we wanted to talk about in great depth in this interview today and this conversation today, to really bring this out that now at this time in our society, I think we're really going through what I call a Copernican revolution with regard to the nature of our understanding of sexuality, what it is to be a sexual human being, how we define human beings in terms of their gender, their sexual gender, and their sexual identity, and the implications that has for our sexual behavior over the course of our lifetimes. So that's something that I just think it's a really, really fascinating topic that all of us need to deal with in our families, with ourselves, in our neighborhoods, our places of employment. This issue is becoming more and more prominent. And I'm sure you see the same thing, uh, don't you, Coach Mike, in your life and in your practice?
Absolutely. It's something that requires a lot of attention, especially as we move forward in helping people optimize their lives and ensure a better quality of life. You mentioned something, Dr. Murphy, that I think our audience would appreciate a little enlightenment on. And you mentioned the Copernicus revolution. Can you explain what that is for us?
So the Copernican revolution literally is the great scientist. Copernicus is the person who discovered uh, a long, long time ago that in fact the Earth goes around the sun rather than the reverse. So it was called the Copernican revolution when hum- humanity slowly understood, even though for centuries beforehand we had always believed that the sun went around the earth because that's how it looks. When we get up in the morning, the sun is rising, and we go to bed at night, the sun is going down over the horizon. We think that the sun is going around the earth. In fact, when we developed the telescope and Copernicus started to understand the realities of what is out there in space, we understood that we, in fact, are going around the sun. We're just another planet in the solar system that's going around the sun. So it was a huge revolution in the understanding of the nature of reality. And that's what I'm trying to get at with that is similarly with regard to gender, sexual identity, sexual behavior. It's we're really going through a time now of revolution that's sort of a sexual revolution, sexual identity revolution in terms of how we understand our sexual identity, our sexual interests, and therefore what is appropriate sexual behavior. So it's just a huge, huge topic that I think everyone is dealing with now. And
Yeah,
certainly we're dealing with in the correctional environment as well,
for sure.
repeatedly we talk about. But, in terms of the general society now, I mean, you read about it every day in the news that there's some kind of situation going on in terms of how people are identifying themselves. And that's an area where, Coach Mike, you have a lot of expertise and experience in talking with people about how they want to be described in
Yeah.
terms of their sexual identity, how they want to be seen by others and treated by others in
Yeah.
terms of their sexual behavior and identity.
Mhm.
So I'm
So,
interested in what you have to say about that.
well, it's interesting that you bring up the Copernican revolution as an introduction to this, because that's exactly what is taking place now, especially as we deal with the TGNC uh, community. We're talking about transgender and nonconforming um, people. Um, the interesting thing is that we have made assumptions for decades, even centuries, about people in general, not realizing that there is a lot more information that needs to be taken into consideration as we deal with each other on a social level, community level, even that family level. Um, Transgender and non-conforming uh, people are an increasing part of our community and of our humanity. And there has been quite a bit of offense. There has been some failure on our parts as just ordinary human beings to acknowledge. But we are actually encouraged to develop a competence when it comes to, especially if we're in any kind of helping profession, whether it's teachers, probation officers, psychologists, anybody that is involved with the sociological development of people, because the TGNC community and their families are are struggling with identity issues that sometimes get trampled and sometimes get unacknowledged, and therefore their human rights are put at risk as a result. So what I'm here to say today is that there is some competence required in working with TGNC population. Um, and beyond acquiring a general competence, I think psychologists who choose to specialize in working with this population, people presenting with gender identity related concerns, um, need to be brought up to speed as far as, especially as far as the difference between gender identification and sexual orientation. It's very common for people to get the lines blurred and make assumptions about the nonconforming people as to their sexual orientation. And that's not to say that it's not confusing, because it can be confusing. But the bottom line, as a rule of thumb, is we need to remember that we're all humans. And when we treat each other with um, kindness, with respect to optimizing their life and creating a better quality of life, the bottom line is that we're all human and we need to be regarded as humans, with the other issues being secondary.
That's a
So
great observation, Coach Mike. I think the profundity of that is just huge. That we're all human beings. We're both members of the Boomer generation, which is the biggest generation that's ever inhabited this planet, and we grew up in an environment in which sexual gender identity was dichotomous in nature. You were either male or you were female. And then as we grew older, we became somewhat aware of other groups that may have some other subtle differences with regard to their sexual interests and behavior. And that was, for a significant amount of time, kind of hidden in the background. And over time, over the course of our lifetime, really has come out of the closet, if you will, and become much more widely accepted by the general population that gender interests and gender identity, and you can talk much more with expertise about this, is really a continuum. And sexual identity and behavioral interests can be seen as existing along a continuum. It's not just male and female, but there is everything in between and subtle gradations all along the spectrum of sexual interests and sexual motivation. And that's a huge shift in our thinking, which for decades of time and probably thousands of years of time has been mainly dichotomous in nature. Even though we hear, and I'm sure you're aware of this too, that so-called primitive cultures, I mean cultures of the past, Aboriginal populations, also integrated, they had already integrated this continuum of sexual interest difference and the subtle stages of differences of sexual preference in their population. We as a Western society are really only now starting to more deeply examine and understand and accept that each person needs to go through a journey of sexual identification themselves. And we can talk more about this after we come back on the break, because it really is a huge issue that we face in terms of our lifetime of sexual interests. I mean, changing over the course of our lifespan, and certainly evolving very, very much when we're young up to the stage of adulthood.
yeah. When we come back, we'll talk more about the application and the effect that it has on society. But don't go away. Stay with us. We'll be back.
Mike Zorek, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a six-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorick, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorick has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
And welcome back. So, thanks for being with us. We're going to be talking a little bit about respecting each other and honoring each other's needs. Has been different reactions to the idea of people that have special needs, and even the stigma that goes with having special needs. Now, it's becoming more and more prevalent nowadays, and you can probably tell that more and more people are going to have to, I don't know, being introduced to the idea of living with and working with people that are on one spectrum or another. We have people with special needs in different communities and different populations. All autism is one of them. Chronically ill people are another. The gender and sexual orientation community. These are all coming into our lives, and we need to understand that we all have needs, and some of those needs are special. Some of those needs are a little bit outside of what we're used to. It's very easy for people to become annoyed over the fact that some people need special care, special attention. The fact that some people need special understanding, mainly because it requires a little bit of homework on our part, a little bit more attention as to what their needs actually are. And it's very easy to trample each other's needs by remaining uninformed or, choosing to be ignorant about some of these things. In my line of work, I deal with people of all different populations, and it's not difficult for me to find myself at a loss. It's not, difficult for me to realize that some of these things are beyond the scope of my knowledge and expertise. At which point, I simply ask for more information and I do my research, on an ongoing basis as it becomes obvious that I need to understand. The TGNC population, transgender nonconforming population, is faced with a number of issues, one of them being the fact that the lines are trampled between sexual orientation and the gender identity, which are two separate things. It becomes very, very complicated as people begin to be enlightened about what happens when someone is born with external sexual characteristics and begin to understand that they don't feel that they're of that gender. So that being said, it's important to realize that we're all individuals and that one label does not fit every other label. And I think Dr. Murphy, you can talk a little bit about this, but let's just take something as basic as racism and the bigotry that can happen for people that just don't care or have an adverse reaction towards having to respect somebody of a different race. As an example, uh, you can talk a little bit about how that bleeds into the population, the social uh, aggravation, if you will.
Yeah, certainly that's the case, Coach Mike. I think in general, we're striving as a species, really, of human beings to understand that we need to respect all of the different varieties of manifestation of human beings and even life forms, whatever life forms there are on the planet. We need to take care of this planet. We need to take care of the natural environment. And we need to respect all colors, all nationalities, all genders, all variations of gender uh, that we encounter in the course of our work and our daily lives. And this is a big step, when we've grown up and spent most of our lives with this sort of simple dichotomy of male and female. And now we're trying to come to grips with the fact that it's actually much more complicated and subtle than that. And in fact, for many people, understanding their gender identity is something that occurs over the course of a lifetime and may vary over the course of a lifetime. One may begin with a particular sexual identity and orientation, be it male or female or trans, whatever it may be. They may have a particular orientation and that may evolve and change due to circumstantial changes in their lives. Maybe they get divorced. Maybe they suffer a physical injury. Maybe they suffer a head injury of some kind and they find that their sexual interest pattern, their sexual preference pattern changes over the course of the lifetime. That's not typical, but it certainly is not terribly unusual either. It does happen. I mean, people really coming to grips with their sexual understanding and having a more deep understanding of who they are as a sexual being certainly can evolve over the course of their early life from birth to young adulthood. And one of the things that I really wanted to point out is that we can, I think, understand now that the clarification of sexual interest and gender preference is something that can well take into young adulthood. So you're not really going to know who you are sexually in terms of your sexual identity and preferences, perhaps until you are fully physiologically matured, which typically doesn't occur until you're 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 years old. I mean, I can remember really not becoming the size that I am now, not having the secondary sexual characteristics that I have now until I was in my early 20s. So that's not that unusual. And the journey that goes along in terms of sexual interest patterns will be something that goes along with that time frame. So I
Sure.
think all of us learning to begin to accept that journey is a long one. Our own sexual development process is to a significant extent a lifetime's journey. And then when you get older, those sexual interests and preferences may change once again as biological processes change, uh, hormones change over the course of a lifetime as you get older. And so, this process of sexual interest and motivation is really a lifetime journey that we need to talk about and pay attention to and respect
Yeah.
throughout
Yeah.
our whole lifetime.
Absolutely. And that leads into an important part of the distinction in gender identity versus sexual orientation. Some things are, are innate, we're born with. For example, we don't get to choose our sexual orientation as much as we get to choose our behavior. Our orientation is one thing, and our behavior is another. gender, we don't have much of a say in what we're born with, what genitalia we're born with. Um, However, the way we identify becomes a matter of, I don't know, personal well-being, for lack of another way of expressing it. The way we identify what our identity is and our role as a human. So the idea of assuring that we are treating each other with dignity and respect as humans becomes an issue, and there's always a stigma attached to people coming out, for example, people identifying, you know, when somebody comes out of the closet, so to speak. I'm talking about sexual orientation right now. Um, if you can imagine what it would be like to wake up to the fact that your orientation is not like everybody else's, and the conflict you're about to encounter as you decide to be open and forthcoming about your sexual orientation. In the past, it has been met with judgment, um, uh, and hostility and maltreatment. So you can understand why somebody would not disclose something like that, because why would anybody want to subject themselves to anything they're not prepared for in that way? Um, and so we need to understand how labels are formed and how they're used. Labels is one of the biggest deals that we're talking about in this situation. And, labels are not there for anyone to use on someone else. In this population, it's something that you probably know about, and the effect of mislabeling somebody. You want to talk about that, Dr. Murphy?
Sure. One of the things that I think in terms of the mislabeling thing is how we have attributed gender and roles within our society, right? So, for example, in the military or in those endeavors that have typically involved a certain amount of aggression, like the need to use aggression for the purpose of accomplishing some goal. That's what the military does. We don't employ the military for the purpose of building roads or building houses. We employ the military for the purpose of going to war and engaging in battles where aggression is needed. We have typically wanted the population of that people to be male, right? So we associate the aggression with male. And in fact, the vast majority of aggressive crimes, and we both know this from our work in the criminal justice system, are perpetrated by males. And so it seems that to some extent, humanity has been hardwired that this hormone that males have, called testosterone, will be a source of energy with regard to aggressive action and is correlated with that kind of behavior. And those kinds of generalizations and those sort of associations that there are, then there are forms of behavior that we believe are more appropriately filled by a given gender. I mean, nurses, nurturing jobs were thought to be needing to be filled by females who would fill that role more readily than males. So talking about these stereotypical sort of gender identifications is something that we really need to examine, I think, in our society, and where we are starting to reevaluate, and those roles are therefore starting to change. I mean, psychologists and medical doctors were overwhelmingly male in the past. Now that's changing, and it's becoming at least equally female, which is a wonderful thing. I mean, it's a great opportunity to make that responsibility to be filled in a way that is not associated with gender. So we'll talk more about that when we come back, because it's a huge process of change that I think we're doing right now, perhaps to our benefit, I hope.
When we come back, don't go away.
Master of words, powerful player, What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom, purpose, passion, power, and peace. All quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and almost miraculously, with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet on Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom, as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness: Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals.
Welcome back.
Right. So one of the things, we're back, and thank you for being with us today. And please focus on the like and subscribe, as we all need to point out, because it's very important to get this information out to lots and lots and lots of people, because this really is a Copernican revolution, as we talked about earlier, a major change and shift in humanity's understanding of what we are as human beings. You know, historically, we've identified in limited ways in terms of male and female, and now we're starting to understand that, in fact, the story, like most of the stories that we have learned initially, is in fact much more complicated and subtle than that simple dichotomous sort of recognition of gender. So I think it's great that we are having this discussion, and that's the key thing, is that we're starting to apprehend these differences and these subtle readjustments that we need to make. And Coach Mike has just pointed out how people can really be affected by how we describe each other and how we want to be perceived, and that really this process is an internal process for each one of us. I mean, what does it mean to be the person who we want to be and who we believe we are? Is that masculine? Is that mainly feminine? And what does that mean anyway? Like, does that have really deep significance, or is it just some kind of transitory or superficial phenomenon that we have thought about in the past, but now is certainly in the process of evolution in terms of how we understand what it means to be who we are? And so understanding, I think, Coach Mike, as we were talking about during the break, that this is really an internal process for all of us to engage in over the course of our lifetime. Who are we? What are we? You know, if we grew up having identified ourselves as male, for example, and then over time understanding that we do have a feminine side. There's a famous psychologist, Carl Jung, who used the term animus and anima to describe the male and female aspects that are present in all human beings. So all of us have these capacities within ourselves to be what we describe as feminine, anima, and to be what we describe as masculine, animus. So he kind of understood that deeply, that within himself, and he was examining himself, and he came to that conclusion by looking at himself and understanding himself over the course of a long lifetime, that all of us have these masculine tendencies, all of us have these feminine tendencies. That in fact, I think over the course of the decades or centuries of time in the future, we will understand that all of us are really men and women. And
Yeah.
we'll all understand that we all have tendencies that we can identify as masculine. Uh, we all have tendencies that we can identify as feminine. And we can work on what that means. And we think that masculine means kind of powerful and assertive and physical and hardworking and all that stuff. And feminine means nurturing and supportive and loving. And, those really are stereotypes that have some meaning. They do have meaning, but they really represent impulses in each one of us
Yeah.
with regard to ourselves. And I hope that over the centuries of time that humanity, I hope, will continue to exist, we clarify those aspects for ourselves, day
Mhm.
by day, week by week, year by year, so that we become more secure with each of those elements, masculine and feminine, within ourselves.
Yeah. Interesting point. That's intense. It's very deep, and I think that as we continue to understand humanity, if we approach it with genuine intrigue, genuine curiosity, I think it's the safest thing to do as we encroach upon the idea of labels and identities and comparisons, even some of those danger zones that we may tend to trample over. I think when we seek to understand more about the situation, if, if we approach it with the idea that we're here to learn about each other, um, we'll be more careful about how we inquire, as opposed to judging somebody and inquiring with criticism. I think we're probably going to get a different result. Kind of. I mean, it's kind of like saying, asking somebody, what are you? You know, that can mean hold up a bunch of different things, right? Dr. Murphy?
That's a great question, I think. And as a philosophy major in college who has sort of been fascinated by the field of philosophy throughout my lifetime, I think it really is so true that the process of self-examination and understanding, striving to understand, who am I? What do I want? What does it mean to be a human being? And in the past, we've identified this in this dichotomous way with regard to male and male and female roles and male and female rights, when in fact, we're all human beings. We are human beings and we need to sort of clarify and rely, I think, now more than ever, as it seems like conflict is coming out in our societies with regard to our national identity, our economic status, our ethnic orientation. I mean, all of these things are needing desperately in need of clarification, I think, and acceptance, that all of us are a constellation of these capacities and identity characteristics. We all have them all to some extent, to a greater or lesser extent, and we can respect each other and care for each other and communicate with each other in a manner that is respectful of those variations and those capacities that we all share to a greater or lesser degree, masculine, feminine, ethnic orientation, physical size, all these things that are characteristics that are um, varying widely, but all of us are human beings. We're all human beings on this planet together. And in the long run, we really need to learn how to get along with each other, care for each other, respect each other. And this whole gender issue is something that's coming out now, I think, much more prominently in a way that simply is demonstrative of the fact that we need to respect each other's being and the evolution of our being over time as a lifetime journey with regard to this issue as well. That who are we sexually? Who are we with regard to gender? Who are we with regard to the characteristics that are typically attributed to those qualities? And I think, if we get that, the world will be a much better place. So this
Listen,
change, though it's really struggle and can be confusing, it's really very positive in the end. And it's really going to be great for us as a species if we can get a better handle on this, what it means to be so-called male or so-called female, and what does that relate to? How significant is it? We really need to get a handle on that, and I think we are in time. So this struggle is a worthwhile struggle, I think.
I totally agree with that one there. As you were talking, it just kind of led me into the idea of remembering what people go through when dating, and how much of a struggle it is to go on a first date. What do you do? What do you ask? How do you present yourself? It's no different from human to human. As far as trying to understand someone with intrigue, the interest should be in knowing what's it like to be you, for example, and creating a welcoming atmosphere for whatever they tell us, for whatever they reveal about what it's like to be them. When we create a safe environment for someone to reveal who they are to us, we're more likely to get a clearer understanding of, you know, how we fit into that person's life and vice versa, how they would fit into our life. So, and that being said, I was reminded of one of the ways that people I determine whether they get along or they're going to respect someone or not has to do, it could be any number of things, uh, uh, racial background, ethnic background, culture. One of the things that gets left out a lot is a person's net worth. Actually, to put it out there, I worked with a man who would Google someone to find out their net worth after he met them, and would treat them differently according to their net worth, which seems pretty shallow to me. But it was his way of learning about if they wanted to become more like that person enough to hang out with them. So the saying, you're the average of the five best people in your life. Uh, it has something to do with that. What do you think, Dr. Murphy?
That's a great observation, I think, in terms of understanding that for thousands of years, these concepts that we have about gender, about, wealth, about power, really have to do with our survival. So we're oriented as human beings to figure out strategies, behavioral strategies that we think are in the best interests of our survival and our ability to even thrive in the context of our lifetimes on this planet. That's the thing that has really guided humanity. Oftentimes we've done things, sometimes great things, and sometimes even shameful things that have occurred over the course of our human history because we think that is in the interests of our survival. So
Wow.
people look at things like money, look at things like gender, look at things like power, all in the interests of thinking about, geez, how is this going to help us to survive as individuals, as a community, as a nation, as a planet? So we make these decisions, and I think, they are all primarily related to our thoughts about our capacities for survival. And this is what has to do what's called evolutionary psychology.
Yeah.
So society really evolves and evolves evolutionary psychology in terms of the attitudes that we think are going to contribute to our ability to carry on as a species. And I think that, this topic is one of the biggest right now that we face as a species. And it's one that we really need to consider to talk about. Just continue this discussion, talk with your friends, talk to your children, talk to your neighbors, talk to your families. I mean, all about this stuff. How do you want to be identified? How do you want to be known? How can I treat you better and more sensitively as the human being that you uniquely are? And so it's an opportunity to have these great conversations. And I really appreciate this opportunity to speak with you today, Coach Mike, and hopefully we can provide our watchers and listeners with more of this kind of information. And I really ask everybody to like and subscribe to this channel. Please give it the support that it needs, because we really need to talk about these issues and look forward to talking about all of these subtleties even more profoundly in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So we'll be back and wrap this up in just a second. Don't go away.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Master of words, powerful player. What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom, purpose, passion, power, and peace. All quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and almost miraculously, with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet on Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom, as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life.
And welcome back. So we've been talking, this is the last part of our 3-part series on sex and touch in the modern world. I'd like to dedicate this last few minutes that we have to how to approach this in everyday life. The likelihood that we're going to be that somebody is going to show up in our life that has a different gender, different sexual orientation, doesn't mean that they don't have the same needs as humans for sex and touch in today's world. But I'd like to ask you, Dr. Murphy, about some suggestions on how to approach this in everyday life as the likelihood increases.
Well, it's interesting, in the course of the interviews that I've done with people, as I've tried to become and help them to become more aware and sensitively aware of their own sexual orientation and patterns, is to discuss with them what their sexual interests are. That is, to what gender or to what kind of stimulation are they attracted if they were to think about what is exciting for them. So people may identify themselves as heterosexual or homosexual or bisexual based on the people to whom they feel sexually attracted, whether it's males or females or both. Then that is one way of getting a deeper understanding of what's going on with that person in terms of their more or less hardwired sexual interest pattern, since that is relatively stable in my experience over the course of a lifetime. A person who has a certain sexual interest pattern, when they reach full puberty, they probably will continue to maintain that pattern in the absence of some kind of very significant medical change over the course of their lifetime. So I think having that conversation with people with whom you're close, you're not going to ask this, of course, of a stranger in the grocery line at the store, of course, but you you would be able to ask and perhaps should ask and have that conversation with people with whom you're very close, your spouse, your potential spouse, close friends who are open to that conversation. Since, one of the things we want to talk about is what, how we can give warmth to other human beings, right?
Yeah.
And so we started this whole conversation with talking about touch and human contact, the language of the skin, and wanting to be close to others and how we can feel warmth and how we can give warmth to others. And this is largely through the process of touch and intimacy, including sexual intimacy, is one of the primary mediums for showing that we care about another person. I mean, the giving of love, the giving of intimacy, the giving of human contact is really a wonderful gift that we have. All animals, we see it throughout the animal kingdom. They touch each other, they share with each other, they give warmth to each other as a source of comfort, and that helps all of us to thrive. So I think it's just really learning how to have the conversations that we need to have in order to be able to um, understand and show understanding that we have an awareness of the other's need for warmth and how they will most comfortably be able to receive warmth and give warmth, having those conversations when, how, what kinds of behavior are most fulfilling for them. It's something that we haven't really been trained very well, I don't think, with our society to talk about a lot. But it certainly is something that we need to share with others and feel open about sharing our own interest pattern. I mean, this is what I like. This is what I desire. This is what I need to experience in order to feel comforted and safe and stimulated and even gratified in this world. So these are all, I think, conversations and forms of communication, and really this whole gender thing, the sexual thing, the touch thing, is another form of communication that it's wonderful that we're beginning to talk about more often and more deeply and more personally. And certainly you, Coach Mike, in your work, you're really doing that work yourself as you strive to help others to, be able to talk about that and feel and share and allow themselves to evolve in terms of how they can feel loved by others.
Yeah. Thank you. The thing is, we forget that we are humans, not humans having the spiritual experience, but the spiritual people having a human experience.
Right.
It's important to realize that, as long as we are able to provide a sense of warmth and an inviting environment for people, they will feel safe in revealing who they are to us, because I think we all have an innate desire to let people know who we are, even the intricacies of our life and the intimacies of our life. We want people to know deep down. And if it's not safe, we won't. If it is, we will.
Something I think we really need to emphasize right now in our culture on the, where we are on the planet is our ability to give love and to really generate love and communicate love to others. And that's what we're talking about mainly here on this channel, is the many avenues that we can use in order to raise the level of consciousness, if you will, on this planet. And this is a big one here, the gender thing, the loving thing, the caring thing, and the communication of warmth to other human beings. Hopefully every day, we can give and receive some love and raise the level of this planet even more.
Absolutely. Thank you for being with us. Like and subscribe to our channel. You can reach Dr. Murphy at, what is your website address, Dr. Murphy?
So my website is psychologicalinvestigations.com, psychologicalinvestigations, plural.com. And I have a book out, Opioid Odyssey, that's available on Amazon. So feel free to look at it, and I look forward to your responses to it all.
Also go to www.olcp.life, and you'll find my website there. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time.
This has been Snippets of Wisdom with hosts Mike Correll and Dr. Michael J. Murphy. Tune in and learn about the primary issues facing our society today and find the best chance of securing a stable and prosperous future. Snippets of Wisdom will enrich your life and the lives of all of your loved ones.